All right. So I'm here with Frosty, aka SBPC. Is it SBPC that you prefer?
SBPC.
Okay, gotcha. Um, and SBPC has a tiering system, like tier list kind of system, that I think is really interesting and wanted to share with all y'all. So to start with, first of all, we should talk a little bit about your background, SBPC, and kind of what led you to use the methods that you're using right now. Tell us a little bit about specifically the Smogon Pokemon tier lists and your involvement with them.
Yeah, so whenever I was first getting into like competitive internet video games, give or take around like 2018, I found the competitive Pokemon website Smogon, where I for quite a while, and I still semi-actively do, contribute to the tiering system, which is done by usage. I can't remember how the idea was really thought up, but basically what they do, and it's an ingenious system, they take the raw usage stats of players who are just actively grinding the ladder, assuming that, everyone's playing what's in their best interest, and use those usage stats to say, okay, yeah, these guys are obviously a lot better than these guys. And to give all the Pokemon a chance to shine, they basically created lower tiers that allow the Pokemon that aren't being used as much, mainly because they fill similar roles, to shine in their own light. And that's how the tiering system was kind of based off of. And I just took that and applied it to Splatoon, where having a background in tiering, I was a tier leader for NFE and some other OMs for a short time, and I was able to apply that to Splatoon since I know how the usage system works and how to manually do the math for it and all of that.
Yeah, so the phrase underused comes directly from that reference to how used they are in, a competitive game.
So you start at overused, and then after 4.25%, it goes down to underused. Yes.
Overused is the Pokemon that you're going to tend to see in like a competitive event. The ones that are just being put on the most people's teams. And then underused, you said 4.25% usage, and then it drops down to underused.
So yeah, it starts at 4.25 for overused, and then dips to if you go under 4.25 usage percent over the course of a 3-month period. I use shorter periods for the Splatoon patch cycles right now, but it will go to longer cycles eventually. Then it drops down to underused, and then
Okay.
if rarely were to ever happen, we would probably use usage for that as
Cool.
well.
So there's just a set number where if it goes below that number, it's UU. It's in that tier of Pokemon. And in this case, we're using that to analyze Splatoon weapons. So the idea here is SBPC is going and finding data for what players are using in tournaments. Tell us a little bit about that process. Like, how are you going and collecting this? How are you tabulating it? Like,
I'm a single person doing this, so there is always room for error, but basically, I stalk the Splatoon Twitch stream category and look for YouTube streams and take every single tournament stream I can possibly find and watch your sets. I lurk chats all the time. I'm basically always watching every tournament stream, and I'm taking usage by one and putting them into a spreadsheet and just kind of doing the math as I go. And basically, the more times you see a weapon, the higher up it will be in percent. And if you don't see a weapon that often, it's because it's not being used in tournaments, so that's how they fall to underuse. So it's just a lot of manual finding the weapons, watching streams back, looking for players that are streaming tournaments. I have a Twitch bot that looks for tournament streams that helps me out with that a lot. But other than that, it is all manual, and it is a lot of work, but it's so worth it because you get to play a metagame that's fun and has kind of the same idea of the original Underused.
so do you have that going right now? Like, is that something you're just actively working on all the time?
Yeah, no, I literally just pop into tournament streams and take marks. It can be stressful during when you're like major season when all the different streams are going on at once, but other than that, it's really just popping onto Twitch and making sure I collect the usage during tournament hours.
Wow. All right. That's cool. I think you mentioned that there was a system of weighting, which results you use. So how does that work?
Oh boy, weighted usage. Okay, so first, do you mind if I make a shout out real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Shoutouts to Marty, the programmer for Pokemon Showdown, who I stole the formulations from for this because this math is basically impossible to figure out if someone else didn't do it first. But I use his system of sort where everything is either one or a decimal of one, where if you're like, say, the best of the best, your use is a whole use, but like the lower down you are in the it, the less I count your usage worth, which is a mean way to say it, but it's just mathematically speaking, like, hey, your usage isn't as valuable as this guy's usage. And the reason that system exists is to say, like, a lot of lower level players will run things that are very, very strong against newer people, like, say, Tentatek. Tentatek is a very good weapon, very well rounded, but it's a lot stronger against people who haven't sharpened their movement compared to Splash just because of RNG and other similar reasons, or stuff like C Junior, which can control space really well. That doesn't function as well in a top level environment, which is why you hardly ever see it. And basically, that use still counts, but it's not as indicative as a top level player's usage.
We talked about playing this metagame. So the reason in part that you're creating UU is to create this environment for competitive play where you can play using the weapons that would be considered UU. So you can ban out all of the OU weapons and be left with a wider pool of available weapons, or at least a pool of available weapons that's significantly different and forces you to adapt and think about the game differently. So how do you organize these play sessions?
Well, currently I only do it in a private server that I own for pickups, but I would be able to make a public server that allowed everyone to partake in these if the demand was high enough. Just I didn't have necessarily the demand or anything to make a public server. I just wanted to share it with friends because we were bored of the current metagame. And it's basically just a gentleman's agreement. Like, so another thing I stole from Smogon is like whenever we were going about saying how we would do this, me and a few friends, we're like, yeah, no, you obviously can't do stuff like ban a special or ban a sub because that's way harder to infringe upon. You want to keep the rule set to what is basically just a gentleman's agreement. So we just ban it by kit. If the kit's used a lot, that kit's out of the window. If the kit's not used as much, that's allowed. And that is how we make sure it stays, healthy.
Okay. So the bans they're just based on the usage list though, right?
Yeah, we only do based on the usage list.
Gotcha.
Occasionally, we have some deal breakers that are very, very, very strong, and that is the purpose of a UU ban list. But we've only had to enforce this one time, and it was when Flings a Roller initially dropped, because when it dropped, Missiles was still very strong, and it had basically zero counterplay.
Gotcha. So Flingza wasn't seeing a ton of use competitively, but it was strong enough that it was too much for the UU tier.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So what's the current the current outlook on UU and OU in Splatoon?
So, well, OU will always just be standard competitive play. So if you want to have good opinions on the metagame, you can always subscribe to the channel you're watching right now at Squid School. You can also look at other competitive creators. I had to plug you. But if you're looking at what the current outlook for UU is, we just had our most recent shift. You can go ahead and put the list on screen here if you have it.
Yep.
But, our recent play before this drop, bow and heavy were considered the top tiers. Basically, top one, top two weapons. Nothing could contest them because a lot of underused without the strong paint of shooters was about, how much can you exert pressure yourself? How much can you make the self player very powerful while also contributing to a team? And of course, the back lines with good paint and pressure distance are going to be the most powerful weapons. Then we had Inzap strong as a painting shooter. And then recently, the shift had a lot of things drop. primarily. Stamper, due to its low player usage, mainly just because of difficulty, but it's like a very, very good weapon in standard play, so it's probably going to be broken here. C Junior and V Junior both dropped. T-Tech dropped, as well as the 89 Zap, which we had moved to OU, thinking Chump was going to be strong when it first dropped, and then we've moved it down to UU for this shift. So it's very, very shaking the dynamic of the tier with all the new shooters dropping. I think the metagame is going to become a lot more paint heavy, a lot more special heavy, but we'll have to see.
All right, yeah. Like, those are a couple of weapons that I've played. You know, the T-Tech, I've messed around with the Zap 89, so that's going to make it, you know, pretty tempting to try and pull into these UU lobbies when you don't have to be worrying about crab tanks and 52 gals and, you know, weapons that just straight up beat you in fights because you don't have quite the range or the agility or the chip damage.
Right.
So.
And I mean, yeah, and like I said, if there's I'm going to be watching the comments of this video. If there's enough public demand for a UU server, I will make one, and I'll probably bring up the neat queue thing so it's easier to make PBs for this. But that is kind of just the idea of UU, is that we play in a lower usage environment.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for explaining all of that. And if anybody is interested, like SBPC said, just let us know in the comments. And if we can get a lively server going for that, SBPC is, you know, always keeping these pretty up to date. I've, you know, been in the server where they drop, and it's just like every time there's like a major patch or we've had, you know, time for more data, newer ones are coming out, and there's a pretty fun community that's grown up around playing with just those weapons and getting to know this new unique metagame that we created inside a larger one that gets actually played at tournaments. Really fun little experiment to liven up the game a little bit and maybe get us to think about it just a little bit differently for understanding how both of those two systems work. So thank you so much for bringing that up for us, SBPC. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about it before we go?
If you play UU, please try not to complain about when things are very strong. Naturally, when the power vacuum is created, a lot of things that aren't top tier become top tier out of nowhere, so just keep an open mind, be willing to experiment, and have fun with the game. I know when it gets to metagames like this, it can be very frustrating, especially right now where I feel like a lot of people are being forced off of their weapons. This is just kind of in general, but like if you're playing the game, like keep playing. Even through the frustration, eventually the metagame will fruit up to a more healthy state, and when it does, you're going to just pop off as a player.
Awesome. Thank you, and thanks for agreeing to come on the show here.
All right, thank you.